All right, for iOS XE, the WCM process, we have program hosting available within iOS XE. Enables us to host different components within the iOS, our feature components and things like that. In the iOS XE, remember, this is a modern iOS with multi-core CPU. This is very easy for customer migration. We have the ability to maintain iOS functionality, look and feel, even though it's not a fully native iOS. We are allowed hosted application and wireless control module, such as in Wireshark, right? We have the ability to use Wireshark here. So this is really an integrated type of applications into the Cisco iOS XE. Now we can do common and infrastructure for HA, high availability. We have our management interface, our module drivers, and the kernel for the Cisco iOS, the driving component of that operating system, the kernel, the backbone on which everything's built. Then we have iOS feature components here. We also have our hosted applications. So the WCM, and in here we see Wireshark. Wireshark's not Cisco, but the Cisco iOS XE allows us to host that in there. So very awesome option, and the ability to update these is very an integral part of keeping this moving and moving well. Now the iOS XE boot modes for the Catalyst 3850, 3650, and the wireless LAN controller 5760, all those can run iOS XE. Remember, this is an iOS with a little bit more. It can only run on certain models, right? We have the ability to implement Wireshark in there. So it's a little bit more than your common iOS. The Catalyst 3850 or 3650 can be booted into a bundle mode or install mode. 5760 supports only install mode, okay? And the manufacturer will ship to boot all devices in install mode only. So the iOS XE boot is based upon models. We've got to be careful here. Based upon a model. If you're buying a 3850, you can move it in bundle mode or in install mode. 5760 or this wireless LAN controller can only be in install. So how does this break down? How do these boot modes work? Well, when we look at these boot modes, we have to understand that these are just packages. That's all really we're looking at. They're install packages for the iOS. And depending on how those iOS is broken down will depend on how the features are set. So we have to be aware of the features that can run on different model numbers as well. So what is the difference between install mode and bundled mode for these two different iOS images? First off, bundle mode is an image that is copied to the flash and software and expanded to boot, just like we would any switch we've seen. If you've ever been on a switch, what happens is we load the configuration and operating system. We load the operating system from flash memory into RAM. That's what we're talking about with bundle mode. Bundled mode works with the 3850 and 3650. It actually includes both the install or this bundled mode. This allows us to take that information and use it in RAM or not. Install mode only works on that wireless LAN controller we discussed. Let me jump back a slide. The wireless LAN controller model 5760. 5760 means it's going to be installed in memory, and that's where we're going to run it from. Different from bundled mode. Remember, bundled and install modes are both supported on the 3850, the 3650, maybe some other 30 whatever 50s that might come out in the future. But that is the difference between installed and bundled mode. Remember, bundled mode is what we use most of the time in the Cisco world. Things are taken from permanent memory and put into RAM. To install a newer version of code, it's pretty interesting or easy to do. You are going to software install from your source. If it is a TFTP server, locate that TFTP server. If it is flash memory, locate the flash memory. Okay? So I'm not saying use it. I'm going to be careful with that arrow. Let me erase that arrow. If the source is a file name bin or in flash even, you would note where it is in your environment. Now, once you have installed this new software, please delete the old software or old files from flash. Use software clean, flash, and then location. Okay, make sure you remove older software so you don't run into using it by default when there's some type of failure. So iOS XE switch stack overview. Remember, we can have up to 9 of these stacking capable switch. There's one master and one standby. The master switch controls the operations. When we're stacked, by the way, we share images. Yeah, we can do that. We can update images from our master. Our master switch contains saved or running files for the entire stack. So again, we have a stack of switches in our environment. Let me just use 3 here. There's a configuration that's going to be propagated out to those other switches. So they're 9 stacked, but they're going to be acting as just one large switch. Very cool method of updating your images. So switch stack upgrades, how does this happen? Stack should use install mode to begin to install. So what we're going to do is switch stack members can be used to upgrade other members. Remember what I said? We use one to upgrade the rest. This is the way we do that. We use the software install source and the location of the image we want to use. Switches joining a stack can be set to automatically upgrade their hardware. So if I have 2 switches in my environment and I'm adding in a third, the iOS XE for this particular switch is going to upgrade as soon as we add it into the stack, as long as they are set to automatically upgrade their software. Really, like I said, really cool automated feature in our environment. And last thing about our switch updates. Remember that our licensing is important here. All switches need to have the same licensing level. You run into issues if we don't. IP-based or IP services. Next up, AP licensing for these stacked iOS XE switches, those extra feature switches that can manage APs. Maximum of 50 APs per stack. We want to configure enough licensing for APs connecting to each switch. The total count or sum of all the members is up to 50 APs. I don't know why they said that. That's redundant. Remember, there can be 9 in a stack. AP count license is on the stack master. He's the one the stack master keeps track. Adding or removing members affects the AP count. So if I take a switch out of the stack and that switch is responsible for 2 APs, my AP count for that master switch dropped by what? It dropped by 2. So removing members affects AP count. Removing individual APs also affects the AP count. If you have any more questions about stacked switching, please look at our routing and switching, our advanced routing and switching, advanced switching class. That's part of the CCNP routing and switching track. Really, CCN9? No, CCNP routing and switching. It's really where you'll learn more about our stacked feature sets.